Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I am your host, Michael Clogs. Today, the UN press briefing leaves us with a summary of in the Ukraine, and they're also going to be talking about a senior personal appointment. And Mali, Yemen, Afghanistan, Egypt, Armenia, and other issues. Let us start by talking about Egypt. On Sunday, a church in Gaza caught fire, and there were several casualties to that, mostly all children. And as far as we can tell, the fire was started by some faulty wiring due to an air conditioner, and it sparked a very tragic fire that killed many worshippers, and most of them, including children. And of course, here at Depictions Media, we offer our condolences to those families that lost someone in that fire. And of course, there's ongoing issues in Afghanistan. And there's, of course, things in Afghanistan. One of the most recent things that we found out here, and they're going to go over more other issues with Afghanistan. In this press briefing you're going to hear, but imagine that the boys can continue and their education all the way through. Of course, there's no limit. Is whatever your family can afford and whatever you want to keep going with as far as education is concerned. But for women, the cutoff for education is at grade 6. So when we think about that you're being cut off from school at approximately 9 to 10 years of age, and you will legally not be able to extend your education beyond that within the borders of Afghanistan. As far as human rights are concerned, education shouldn't be a privilege. It should be a right given to every human being on the planet. Everybody should have the right to the same opportunities for education. So that was one issue that is coming around after 1 year of the Taliban having control of Afghanistan. There are, of course, other issues along with that. There's still the ongoing thing with hunger and other things, and you're going to hear from in the press briefing about the UNFPA and, of course, UNICEF with ongoing work in that area. And why don't we go ahead and move on to listen to what is going on with that after we talk about one of the recordings is also the proliferation of nuclear weapons and trying to get countries to curb nuclear weapons and eventually nuclear disarmament, dismantling all the weapons around the world that are in existence, and putting the nuclear power to better use in a time of climate change and things like that. The nuclear power could be one of the keys to eliminating coal-fired plants, diesel-fire generators, and alike for cleaner, less emitting energy sources, and nuclear could be one of those things, one of those ways of going. And ongoing research could come up with ways that will make nuclear power safer. But first on board, we got to stop building the nuclear weapons and eliminate the threat of nuclear destruction by way of those weapons. So we're going to hear from the General Assembly floor about documents being drafted and countries that are looking to put agreements in place that would eliminate the idea of nuclear weapons. So let's listen to how everything played out, and we're going to start with the nuclear non-proliferation agreements and talks.
In the evening of Friday, 12 August 2022. In producing this draft, I have taken into account statements delivered by groups and national delegations during the meetings of Main Committee 1, as well as working papers submitted to the Secretariat. I trust that delegations would have had the opportunity to consider the draft and consult with capitals accordingly. Today, we will proceed with the reading of the first draft of the report. I will first invite delegations to make general comments on the draft report as a whole. Subsequently, we will go through the draft report section by section, and I will invite delegations to share observations and make comments. We hope to complete our consideration of the draft report by the end of today's meeting. As such, I encourage all delegations to be as concise as possible in sharing your views. After hearing comments and considering all submissions of proposals, it is my intention to issue a revised draft of the report by tomorrow. As per standard practice, this will be circulated through the Secretariat. Based on our discussions, delegations are welcome to provide their proposals to the Chair's team in writing. I now invite states parties to take the floor to share general comments on the draft report as a whole. Delegations may request the floor by pressing the microphone from their seats. I invite any comments on general comments. I recognize.
Now provide feedback on your draft. In our view, the draft provides a solid starting point as it seeks to reflect the different points of view expressed during our debate. In this context, allow me to welcome those proposals of the MPDI and the Stockholm Initiative that have been included in your draft. At the same time, we do believe that further work needs to be done to refine your draft to ensure that the different views expressed can be reflected in such a way that they enjoy the consensus of the state parties. We also take into account your plea and the chair and those of the chair of the subsidiary body 1 to read the two reports in conjunction with each other. In this context, allow me to make some observations on your draft. First, we appreciate how your report builds on the existing acquis from previous review conferences, and we believe that the starting paragraphs of your report provide us with a solid common point of reference. Second, while we welcome the reflection of the importance attached to gender perspective by many state parties, we know that some of the language deviates from that used in other reports. We encourage you, together with the other colleagues in the Bureau, to work on a more streamlined reference. Third, we express our concern with the introduction of a new category of states under the NPT in paragraph 23. The NPT recognizes only two types of states, nuclear weapons and non-nuclear weapon states, and both have an obligation to report. Hence, we cannot support this paragraph. Fourth, we believe it is important that the conference expresses its strong support for the CTBT, the Preparatory Commission for the CTBTO, and the International Monetary System. Hence, we would welcome your reflection on this issue in the report. Some more specific remarks concern paragraph 17. Reporting has also been discussed this morning, and I'd like to mention the concrete proposal by the MPDI and others has been put forward this morning by the Philippines. Paragraph 25. Here we should mention the increase of nuclear weapons by one nuclear weapons state in particular, as has been pointed out by several colleagues, and the lack of transparency about that process. The paragraphs 34 to 36 on FMCT has been reflected, but we are missing the mentioning of voluntary moratorium on the production of fissile material, an issue raised by many states and mentioned in the 2010 outcome document. Paragraph 42, we welcome the text, but we can be more specific, namely that it concerns the Budapest Memorandum and which the Russian Federation has violated in attacking Ukraine. On the issue of nuclear sharing, many remarks already have been made, and the proposal made just by now by China cannot be accepted. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Netherlands for the intervention. I now would like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Germany. Germany, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to join colleagues in thanking and congratulating you for producing this constructive draft, which, in our opinion, serves as a good basis for further discussions. We are pleased to see that the draft reaffirms very clearly the validity of past commitments and puts the main focus on the lack of implementation of Article 6. And we are equally content to note that many consensus-orientated proposals made in the framework of the Stockholm Initiative or by the Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Initiative are reflected in the text. For the sake of time, I will focus here on the paragraphs where we see potential for improvement. First, the topic of nuclear threats, especially given the current security environment, has not yet received the attention it deserves. We therefore propose to add language to para 20. We will submit this language in writing. Second, the NPT only recognizes two categories of states, that is, nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states. We therefore ask for the deletion of para 23, which seems to introduce the third category of states, contrary to the wording and spirit of the treaty. Secondly, the para duplicates reporting requirements which are already clearly addressed with regard to all member states of the treaty. Third, we also would like to add the conference encourages nuclear weapon states to commit to, or in case they have already done so, uphold their declared moratoriums on the production of fissile material for nuclear weapons at the end of Para 36. Fourth, the language on negative security assurances in Paras 41 to 43 should be streamlined and strengthened. As I said, we will submit concrete proposals in writing. We fully support you in your endeavor to work towards further developing a document that can be the basis for consensus. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Germany for the statements. I now would like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Jordan to be followed by Kiribati. Jordan, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, my delegation would like to thank you for the inclusive and balanced draft report that you circulated on Friday. The report highlights the continued validity of previous commitments and state parties' rights and obligations under the treaty. From our perspective, the report is balanced enough to serve as a solid starting point for an all-inclusive negotiations in order to reach consensus on the final outcome document. We urge constructive engagement and call for maximum flexibility from all state parties, as it's our common wish that we agree on a final outcome document. I assure you, Mr. Chair, of my delegation's full support and constructive engagement throughout the negotiations. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Jordan for his statement. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kiribati to be followed by Mexico. Kiribati, you have the floor.
For giving me the floor. Kiribati welcomes this initial draft as a good basis for us to build upon. Kiribati attaches the highest importance to the fulfillment of Article 6 in order to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons. We are disheartened by the lack of progress from the nuclear weapon states. Thus, we agree with the proposed language set forth in paragraph 9, but would prefer it to expand upon the failures by certain states to implement prior commitments, including from 1995, 2000, and the 2010 outcome documents. We appreciate the proposed language on reducing the role of nuclear weapons in the military doctrines of nuclear weapon states and their allies. Perhaps the draft should recognize that the actions of nuclear weapon states, which have led to quantitative and qualitative increases in their arsenals, are inconsistent with legal obligations set forth in Article 6 of the NPT. Chair, turning your attention to the references to the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons and the humanitarian conference, Kiribati welcomes paragraphs 27 to 30. Chair, we regret that the draft does not fully condemn nuclear threats. In this regard, we propose a new paragraph that states, "We are alarmed and dismayed by threats to use nuclear weapons and increasingly strident nuclear rhetoric. We stress that any use or threat of use of nuclear weapons is a violation of international law, including the Charter of the United Nations. We condemn unequivocally any and all nuclear threats, whether they be explicit or implicit, and irrespective of the circumstances." Chair, we strongly welcome the reference to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. However, the report does not address the complementarity of the TPNW with the NPT. In this regard, we should build upon paragraph 31 by stating that the TPNW is an effective measure under Article 6 to fulfill the disarmament commitment of the NPT, and it complements the NPT, and that it is a welcome addition to the nuclear proliferation, the disarmament regime. Chair, we also wish to support Kazakhstan's proposal to be stated soon that the main committee should provide references to the importance of the International Day Against Nuclear Tests. We will submit additional comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Kiribati for the intervention, and now I would like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Señor presidente, le voy a pedir que me disculpe porque no voy a ser fiel al multilingüismo que debería caracterizar nuestros trabajos, pero hemos advertido una gran cantidad de deficiencias en la interpretación y tendré que pronunciar algunas frases en inglés para mayor claridad. Muchas gracias. En primer lugar, permítame, señor presidente, agradecerle de manera muy enfática la preparación de este primer proyecto de informe del trabajo del Comité Principal 1 y reconocemos su trabajo, señor presidente, y el de su equipo. En forma preliminar compartiré algunas observaciones generales, de índole general, a reserva de realizar comentarios más específicos dependiendo de cómo usted nos indique que llevará a cabo el ejercicio de revisión del proyecto. En primer lugar, se trata de un informe breve que en esta fase de la negociación podría incorporar mayores desarrollos para fortalecerlo. En efecto, llama la atención que el primer proyecto del informe de los comités principales 2 y 3 sean mucho más amplios que el proyecto que usted nos presentó y mucho más detallados. Ello podría no tener trascendencia si al final de nuestros trabajos los 3 pilares del Tratado de No-Proliferación reciben la misma atención y peso en la toma final de decisiones. Pero las asimetrías que observamos entre las obligaciones y compromisos de los estados poseedores de armas nucleares, nuclear weapon states, y los no poseedores, non-nuclear weapon states, hacen relevante buscar equilibrios en los compromisos que podamos acordar en las conferencias de examen. En segundo lugar, reconocemos que el proyecto de informe refleja muchas de las solicitudes y argumentos formulados en los debates, y estamos muy agradecidos con usted, señor presidente, por ello, en especial en lo relativo a la reafirmación de la vigencia de las obligaciones y compromisos de las partes del Tratado de No-Proliferación en materia de desarme nuclear. Sin embargo, deberíamos tener claridad respecto de si el proyecto citará o hará referencia explícita a la instrumentación de acciones concretas del Plan de Acción de 2010. Si se trata de reafirmar la vigencia de los compromisos previos, deberían estar citadas las distintas acciones y el lenguaje debería ser completo y no incurrir en una paráfrasis o reducción de este lenguaje. Si acordamos que no se traerán a colación de manera explícita las acciones concretas del Plan de Acción de 2010, pues entonces debemos tenerlo claro para evitar incongruencias en el documento final. Lo anterior es de particular relevancia en el caso de los compromisos contraídos por los estados poseedores de armas nucleares, nuclear weapon states, ya que solo una de las acciones del plan de acción, la acción 5, se refiere a dichos países y nos preocuparía que en el informe de los otros 2 comités principales sí se citan acciones del plan de acción, pero no en el informe del comité principal 1. Por tanto, aquí hay un desequilibrio que debemos corregir. En tercer lugar, además de la reafirmación en torno a los compromisos y obligaciones previos, la conferencia también puede reflejar nuevos desarrollos con nuevo lenguaje. Reconocemos, por ejemplo, la relevancia de que el proyecto contenga el reconocimiento de la falta de cumplimiento pleno del artículo 6 y los exhortos a los estados poseedores de armas nucleares, Nuclear Weapon States, a que continúen acciones hacia el desarme nuclear. Pero es importante fortalecer dichos llamados, entre otras razones, para explicar el ambiente político en el que se desarrolla esta conferencia, en la que la mayoría de las partes hemos expresado nuestra honda preocupación por la continua existencia de las armas nucleares y la amenaza del uso de estas armas, especialmente en el contexto del conflicto en Ucrania, amenazas proferidas por la Federación de Rusia. También debe reflejarse que nuestro objetivo final es alcanzar y sostener un mundo libre de armas nucleares. Así de claro, así de sencillo, señor presidente. Reconocemos, desde luego, la inclusión del lenguaje sobre la reiteración de la preocupación por las catastróficas consecuencias humanitarias de las armas nucleares, tal como lo expresó la conferencia en 2010. Señalamos, sin embargo, que debe reiterarse la necesidad de que todos los estados cumplan con el derecho internacional aplicable, incluyendo el derecho internacional humanitario, tal como la conferencia lo expresó en dicha ocasión, y es algo que también dijimos esta mañana en el contexto del órgano subsidiario 1, junto con muchas otras delegaciones. Consideramos además que los párrafos correspondientes a este tema deberían ser los que inicien el texto. Todo esto es lo que tiene que figurar en el chapeau del proyecto de informe, en concordancia con los objetivos del Tratado de No-Proliferación expresados, por supuesto, en su preámbulo, que forma parte integral del examen que hacemos en esta conferencia. El preámbulo es una parte muy importante del tratado. Finalmente, tomamos nota y le agradecemos, señor presidente, de la referencia a la negociación, entrada en vigor y a la celebración de la primera reunión de los Estados parte del Tratado de Prohibición de las Armas Nucleares, Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW, uno de los más importantes desarrollos que ocurrieron durante el ciclo de examen que estamos concluyendo. Desde luego que el lenguaje que usted nos propone, señor presidente, constituye una buena base para nuestra negociación. No obstante, consideramos necesario reforzar este lenguaje con la aseveración que no pasa de ser una aseveración factual, es una afirmación factual en el sentido de que los estados parte del TPNW consideramos que este tratado es plenamente compatible con el Tratado de No Proliferación y constituye para nosotros, los estados parte en el tratado, en el TPNW, para nosotros constituye el cumplimiento de las obligaciones que hemos asumido también a título del artículo 6 del Tratado de No Proliferación. Concluyo, señor presidente, reiterando que mi delegación trabajará con el ánimo más constructivo posible durante la revisión detallada del texto que usted nos ha propuesto y cuenta usted, señor presidente, con nuestro apoyo para realizar esta tarea. Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of Mexico for his intervention. Now I would like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of France, to be followed by Kazakhstan. France, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vous remercie pour tous vos efforts ainsi que pour ceux de votre délégation pour ce projet de rapport. Je ferai quelques commentaires. Certains parmi ceux que je ferai ont déjà été formulés ce matin. Le premier a trait à une réalité qui est que le désarmement nucléaire ne se fera pas in abstracto, et nous vous encourageons vivement à incorporer du langage sur le contexte de sécurité contemporain et le principe de sécurité non diminuée pour tous dans ce projet. Les efforts de désarmement doivent se faire en prenant en compte les préoccupations de sécurité de tous et, je souligne, de toutes les délégations. Je vous encourage à coordonner vos efforts avec ceux de la présidente de l'organe subsidiaire 1 afin que les rapports puissent se lire de façon harmonisée l'un avec l'autre. Ce point a été fait par d'autres avant moi. S'agissant du processus dit P5 entre les 5 États dotés, au paragraphe 18 et suivant, nous souhaitons mettre en exergue les efforts qui ont été entrepris en matière de dialogue sur les doctrines et de réduction des risques stratégiques, avec un appel à l'approfondissement de ces efforts. Nous attirons votre attention sur le fait que la déclaration des chefs d'État et de gouvernement des 5 États dotés du 3 janvier 2022 ne peut faire l'objet d'une lecture réductrice. La nature strictement défensive des doctrines de dissuasion est à ce titre un élément important pour ma délégation. Nous sommes favorables au renforcement du langage sur la transparence sur les arsenaux et doctrines, absents de ce document. Dans le paragraphe 34, la conférence déplore l'absence de négociations sur un FMCT. Elle pourrait également reconnaître la valeur ajoutée que constitue un moratoire sur la production de matières fissiles comme une première étape vers un traité FMCT. Nous sommes également favorables au renforcement du langage sur le mémorandum de Budapest. Ce point a été fait avant moi par les Pays-Bas. Par le biais de ce mémorandum, la Russie a octroyé des garanties de sécurité à l'Ukraine dans le cadre de son accession au TNP. Et il est important de rappeler, lorsque l'on se penche sur la mise en œuvre des obligations, que ce mémorandum a été violé, et ce depuis 2014. Ma délégation ne croit pas utile de rappeler ici les positions de la France sur les conséquences humanitaires et sur le traité d'interdiction des armes nucléaires, positions qui ont été étayées dans le détail le 11 août et dont nous constatons qu'elles n'ont pas été prises en compte. S'agissant du paragraphe 14 sur le niveau d'alerte des forces nucléaires, il est important de refléter les mesures déjà existantes. Ce commentaire vaut également pour le paragraphe 17 sur le reporting, les rapports nationaux. Enfin, une recommandation d'ordre général porte sur la nécessité de se garder de toute lecture sélective des engagements passés de l'article 6 ou encore de l'avis de la Cour internationale de justice. Monsieur le Président, ma délégation se tient prête à examiner dans un esprit constructif la version amendée de ce projet de rapport et nous vous adressons de nouveau nos remerciements.
I thank the distinguished representative for her intervention. Now I would like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kazakhstan, to be followed by New Zealand. Kazakhstan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of my delegation, I commend you and your team for the tireless efforts and preparation of the initial draft report. Let me share with some preliminary comments. As you are aware, United Nations General Assembly, in accordance with Resolution 64/35, proclaimed the day of 29 August as the International Day Against Nuclear Tests. The commemoration serves as a special forum to create awareness on the dangers of nuclear tests and weapons and the need to abolish them. This day also remains an indispensable instrument in bringing issues of non-proliferation and disarmament to the attention of new generations and reminding decision makers of the dangers that weapons of mass destruction pose to our world. The day's mandate is also closely aligned to the objectives of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. This International Day, therefore, facilitates necessary efforts to mobilize action by United Nations member states to ensure the speedy entry into force of the CTBT. In this vein, our delegation proposes that Main Committee 1 should provide references to the importance of the International Day against nuclear tests. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Kazakhstan for the intervention and the proposal. I'd like now to give the floor to the distinguished representative of New Zealand, to be followed by Algeria. New Zealand, you have the floor. Microphone.
It is very clear from your draft that you have listened carefully to delegations, and we appreciate the deft way you have sought to cover all the main elements of discussion within Main Committee 1. We therefore consider your text to provide a concrete basis for our future work. You have captured an appropriate balance between reaffirming existing obligations and commitments, welcoming progress where some has been evident, and recognizing the many areas where further work is needed. This is commendable and should give all delegations confidence in the draft text and your approach. Against that background, I will keep my remarks very brief and simply highlight the following 4 points for New Zealand. First, we think the report contains a fair assessment of non-nuclear weapon state concerns about the trajectory of nuclear disarmament efforts. We welcome its clear expression of concern about the qualitative improvement of nuclear weapons, the development of new types of nuclear weapons, the lack of progress in diminishing the role of nuclear weapons in security policies, and this low level of transparency surrounding these activities. We are particularly pleased to see in black and white our clear understanding that the indefinite extension of the NPT in 1995 did not imply the indefinite possession of nuclear weapons by the nuclear weapon states. We strongly support the retention of this text as an honest assessment of where we are in 2022. Secondly, we are pleased that the draft includes concern about the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons and includes a clear statement of why this concern exists and what it means. This is appropriate and captures the progress that has been made over the past 12 years on this issue. Third, we consider the reference to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons to be factual and fair. We hope all delegations can accept it, whatever their relationship with the TPNW. New Zealand, for example, supports the references to the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, even though this treaty has not yet entered into force. New Zealand supports the recommencement of negotiations on the Fissile Material Cut-Off Treaty, even though this treaty's negotiations haven't even restarted. So it makes absolute sense to us to include a factual and fair reference to the TPNW, which is in force and which has met and which has taken decisions that are binding on its member states. Anything less than that, Mr. Chair, would not constitute a fair review of relevant developments since we last met in 2015. And finally, Mr. Chair, we welcome the explicit references to negative security assurances and to the Budapest Memorandum, and consider it essential that this conference recognises the importance of existing security assurances being honoured and upheld. Finally, Mr. Chair, we reserve the right, with your permission, to submit further detailed comments during this or later meetings and to submit text proposals as required. And I want to reiterate to you the assurance of my delegation's full support to you. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of New Zealand for her intervention. I would like now to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Algeria, to be followed by Austria. Algeria, you have the floor.
شكرا السيد الرئيس. بداية أود أن أثني عليكم السيد الرئيس على الطريقة التي تديرون بها لجنتنا. وأود أيضا أن أشكركم وأشكر فريقكم على الجهود الحثيثة وكذا على مسودة التقرير. هذه المسودة التي وجدناها حقيقة متزنة شاملة وتعكس الآراء والمواقف المعبر عليها خلال أشغال اللجنة الأولى. يمكن أن تشكل هذه المسودة أرضية حسنة لبدء التفاوض مع جميع الدول وبصفة مقبولة. لدينا بعض المقترحات السيد الرئيس سنقوم بإرسالها حتى نساهم في تعزيز توازن المسودة وتسهيل اعتماد مخرجات توافقية للجنة. بصفة خاصة أود أن أبرز بعض النقاط الجيدة في المسودة السيد الرئيس بخلاف الآراء والمواقف الموجودة هنا وهناك والمعبر عليها والتي سمعناها ونسمعها تبعا. يعني خصوصا أود أن أشكركم على إدراج المقاربة الإنسانية التي تعتمد أساسا على الآثار الوخيمة الآثار والعواقب الوخيمة للأسلحة النووية بما فيها استخدامها. هذه المقاربة التي تعكس بصورة حقيقية وواقعية رأي المجتمع الدولي ككل وأغلبية الدول الأطراف في هذه الاتفاقية. ونرى أنه من غير المعقول أن نواصل أو تواصل بعض الدول في فرض مقاربات مستمدة من السنوات الماضية. هذه المقاربة هي مقاربة لا توجد فقط في ميدان نزع السلاح، لكنها مقاربة تستند على أسس وأطر شاملة، يعني جميع نظام الأمم المتحدة ككل والعالمي أيضا. النقطة المهمة أيضا التي أود أن أشير عليها هي إلى إدراج فقرة تتعلق بمعاهدة حظر الأسلحة النووية. هي نقطة تحسب لك السيد الرئيس، يعني هي إشارة جيدة جدا وتعكس انتباهك واهتمامك بوثيقة دولية بمعاهدة دولية. لا يمكن أن نستمر في إغلاق آذاننا وغلق أعيننا عليها. هي معاهدة موجودة وهي بصدد شق الطريق من أجل دعم جهودنا الجماعية في نزع السلاح النووي. وأظن أنه لا بد في إطار معاهدتنا هذه أن نجد حيزا زمنيا ثابتا للحديث عن هذه المعاهدة وعن آثارها الجيدة وعن أيضا المقاربة التي بنيت عليها. النقطة أيضا المهمة هي إدراج العنصر القانوني في نزع السلاح خارج الام بي تي بطبيعة الحال، وهو محكمة العدل الدولية فيما يخص رأيها الاستشاري الذي يؤكد على حسن النية في التفاوض. لكن هناك أيضا نقطة أيضا أدرجتها محكمة العدل الدولية التي لم أجدها شخصيا، أود أن توجد في المسودة الأخيرة، وهي أيضا نابعة من محكمة العدل الدولية وتتعلق بالآثار الإنسانية للأسلحة النووية. شكرا السيد الرئيس.
I thank the distinguished representative of Algeria for his intervention. I now would like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Austria, to be followed by Italy. Austria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. First, I would like to thank you for the first draft, which we see as a good basis for our work. We certainly appreciate that putting together a document that captures the momentous developments over the past review cycle is a difficult task, and we thank you and your colleagues in the Secretariat for taking it on. We also appreciate that some of our points have been taken up in what is inevitably a compromise text. We look forward to working with you on this text towards a strong, progressive and concrete outcome document. We will submit detailed change proposals later and in writing, but allow me to make a couple of general points at this stage. Chair, we find ourselves in extraordinary times with nuclear risks higher than they have been in decades, new risk drivers being introduced by new technologies, and increasingly strident nuclear rhetoric, including nuclear threats. This and the clear non-implementation and backtracking on obligations and commitments on nuclear disarmament has put the NPT under unprecedented strain. A strong, credible outcome under Pillar 1, with concrete progress, but also clearly expressing concern at the lack of progress in implementation, is essential. This is required not just for the credibility of the NPT, but international peace and the international security environment as a whole. Undiminished security cannot just concern the security of some, but must also concern the security of all, including all non-nuclear weapon states that are currently threatened by nuclear weapons and the policy of nuclear deterrence. It must also take into account the evidence on the humanitarian consequences and risks of nuclear weapons. It is exactly the current and indeed very dangerous and disconcerting security situation that necessitates urgent progress. Mr. Chair, commitments have been made over many previous review cycles, but implementation has been unsatisfactory. It is therefore essential that we adjust our working methods and introduce concrete benchmarks, timelines, and accountability to ensure the full implementation by all parties with all NPT provisions and commitments in spirit and letter. We also need to be clear that these are not open-ended commitments, but that concrete and urgent progress towards eliminating all nuclear arsenals by the nuclear weapon states is essential for the credibility of the treaty. We've spoken in the last 2 weeks in detail about the issues of qualifier and conditionality, which we've seen used to justify inaction or even backtracking. Looking at progress under Pillar 1, we have outlined in detail the clear backtracking on Article 6 obligations and related commitments. So this conference should express itself clearly on these concerning developments. On risk reduction, we've submitted comprehensive proposals and argue for a broad approach in order to remove nuclear weapons as far away from use or accident as possible. Risk reduction also needs to be properly framed as a legitimate interest of non-nuclear weapon states in light of the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of nuclear explosions, let alone a nuclear conflict. The draft should be strengthened in this direction. We would also like to request stronger language on nuclear threats and support the comments made by Kiribati on this. Austria supports comments by others with regard to strengthening the language on the Budapest Memorandum and supports strong language on negative security assurances. We also request a clear reaffirmation on the need for all states at all times to comply with applicable international law, including international humanitarian law. Mr. Chair, the report should further welcome the increased attention in the last review cycle on efforts to provide victim assistance and environmental remediation following nuclear use and testing to address nuclear harm and encourages continued efforts in this regard. On the TPNW, in line with the comments made before by Mexico, New Zealand and others, we welcome the factual inclusion and request a factual strengthening to include the current status of the treaty, as well as a mention of the fact that TPNW states parties consider the treaty as fully compatible and consistent with an effective measure for the implementation of the NPT. And finally, we would welcome text on urgently needed widening participation in NPT deliberations, but request further and concrete strengthening of the test. As I said, we will submit concrete written proposals to you. We look forward to working with you and colleagues in the room to achieve a strong, concrete and credible outcome to strengthen the NPT and the disarmament and non-proliferation regime as a whole, which is particularly important at this moment in time. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Austria for his intervention. I now would like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Italy, to be followed by Japan. Italy? You have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Italy would also like to thank you for your constructive first draft report, which we believe is a good starting point for further negotiations. Among other points, we are pleased with the reference to the importance of the entry into force of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty with the utmost urgency, and that of the immediate commencement of negotiations on a treaty banning production of fissile material at the Conference on Disarmament. We reserve the right to submit further comments and proposals later on, but at this point I would like to focus on a couple of points. Like other delegations, we cannot support paragraph 23, in that it seems to imply a third category of states parties, besides the two categories of nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states foreseen by the treaty, and we request the deletion of this paragraph. In terms of negative security assurances, like other delegations, we support a stronger language in reference to the Budapest Memorandum and the fact that this memorandum was violated by Russia by attacking Ukraine. I thank you, Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Italy for his intervention. Now I would like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Japan, to be followed by South Africa.
Mr. Chairperson, thank you very much for granting me the floor. I appreciate very much this draft text, which constitute a very good basis for our further work, leading to a consensus. And also, I appreciate some of the languages which Japan has proposed as a member of the cross-regional groups, such as the NPDI and the Stockholm initiatives. To some extent reflected in this draft. So we appreciate these drafting efforts made by the chairperson and his team. And we have some proposal, text proposal. So allow me to submit these proposal texts in writing later. But let me highlight some of the elements to which we attach particular importance. First, paragraph 20, Japan is delighted to join the other member states in welcoming the affirmation by the nuclear weapon states that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. But I would like to recall that many state parties expressed its concern when they are facing the clear violation of this affirmation in Ukraine by the Russian Federation. So I think it is appropriate to register these concerns and also the calls made by many the member states for the nuclear weapon states, especially one nuclear weapon state, to honor not by words but by actions their crucial commitment. I would like to submit the text proposal later on this paragraph 20. Second, as far as paragraph 25 is concerned, the conference express not only concern should express concern not only for the qualitative improvement, but also about the quantitative expansion. The qualitative improvement of the nuclear arsenal, as well as the quantitative expansion of nuclear arsenals, two key elements to which this conference should properly address. So Japan proposed to add the following words, which read, after the qualitative improvement, the following words, which would read, and the quantitative expansion. Thirdly, as for the paragraph 34, we share the disappointment expressed in this paragraph, and moreover, Japan is of the view that conference also express its disappointment to the fact that not all nuclear weapon states declare on the moratoria on the production of fissile material. So we would like to add to expression of this disappointment to the fact that not all nuclear weapon states declare on the moratoria on the production of fissile material at the end of the paragraph 34. Lastly, I have heard many state parties has underlined the importance of the nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation education. So it is appropriate for the conference in this review part to underscore the importance of disarmament and non-proliferation education. I would like to propose some appropriate language which we can find within the joint statement which I had honor to deliver on 5th of August with the 89 the co-sponsors. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Japan for the intervention and proposal. I would like now to give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Africa, to be followed by Switzerland. South Africa, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairperson, the South African delegation commends and thanks you and your team for the hard work in coming up with the draft report of our main committee. We are grateful to you for taking on board a wide range of views expressed. This has delivered a document that presents us a useful basis for taking stock of the implementation of Pillar 1 of the treaty. Mr. Chairperson, we have identified a number of elements related to the implementation of the treaty that need to be reflected if we are to have a proper outcome on which we can all agree. If we are to provide a factual reflection of the developments related to the NPT during the past review cycle, the conference will have to acknowledge that the period under review delivered a multilateral instrument that comprehensively prohibits nuclear weapons. That is the TPNW, a treaty that is fully consistent with the Non-Proliferation Treaty, in particular Article 6. In our delegation's view, it will also be necessary for the conference to acknowledge the legally binding commitments prohibiting the transfer, receipt, seeking of assistance, and allowing the stationing of nuclear weapons that a large number of NPT states have entered into during the previous review cycle. We will provide language in writing on this aspect. With regards to decisions on the resolutions adopted by the 1995 Review and Extension Conference, the final document of the 2000 Review Conference, and the conclusions and recommendations for follow-on actions of the 2010 Review Conference, the conference needs to reiterate the consensus nature of these agreements, meaning that everyone agreed to them. On the matter of the conference recalling the commitment by the nuclear weapons states to implement their unequivocal undertaking, we call for this report to clearly indicate that this must be done in a transparent, irreversible, and verifiable manner. The specific placement will be provided in writing to you, Mr. Chairperson, by my delegation. In the same vein, in paragraph 9, we as member states will have to be clear that the conference's deep regret at the lack of progress with the implementation of Article 6 relates first and foremost to the lack of implementation by nuclear weapon states. We cannot shy away from this indisputable fact, Mr. Chairperson. In the current security environment brought about by the lack of disarmament, it is crucial for the conference to note the concerns of non-nuclear weapon states with regard to security reviews of nuclear weapon states, which indicate, amongst others, an increase of nuclear weapons, increase of nuclear stockpiles, and the lowering of the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons. And on risk reduction, Mr. Chairperson, it is important that this is framed in a way that does not deflect us from the fundamental objective of the full implementation of Article 6. We will come back again with this, on this with language that will assist. These are just some of the comments and inputs on the draft report that we would like to make at this moment, and we will share a number of other inputs and comments with you, Mr. Chairperson, that will be able to move us closer to consensus on this document. my delegation stands ready to work constructively towards a document that can be adopted by consensus. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of South Africa for her intervention. I would like now to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Switzerland, to be followed by Sweden. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous tenons à vous faire part de notre gratitude pour ce premier jet du rapport de notre commission. Il constitue, de notre point de vue, une base solide pour faire avancer nos travaux et reflète dans les grandes lignes les points soulevés par les délégations au cours des séances que nous avons tenues. Nous nous félicitons que le texte s'appuie sur les engagements existants et cherche à les renforcer, tout en soulignant les domaines dans lesquels des progrès sont particulièrement nécessaires. Le projet est exhaustif et il semble que la plupart des questions clés soient contenues dans le projet de texte. La consolidation de certains éléments avec le texte développé par l'organe subsidiaire 1 pourrait être nécessaire, mais nous pouvons déjà constater un degré significatif de complémentarité entre les deux textes, ce qui est un signe positif. Ceci est important et significatif car le texte de la Grande Commission 1 fournit la base sur laquelle celui de l'organe subsidiaire 1, tourné vers l'avenir, devrait s'appuyer. Évidemment, cela ne signifie pas que le texte ne nécessite pas des modifications de langage ou que des ajouts ne sont pas encore nécessaires. À ce stade, nous avons 4 commentaires à formuler. Il a été dit ce matin que la déclaration du 5 janvier des États dotés, selon laquelle une guerre nucléaire ne peut être gagnée et ne doit pas être menée, devrait être mise en exergue comme elle le mérite. Nous partageons ce point de vue. Nous devrons voir comment cet aspect sera articulé une fois que le rapport de la Grande Commission 1 et de l'organe subsidiaire 1 seront fusionnés. Mais il est clair qu'il faut donner à cette affirmation toute la proéminence nécessaire. Deuxièmement, nous saluons le constat, le regret formulé dans le rapport quant à la lenteur des progrès dans le désarmement nucléaire, ainsi que la préoccupation concernant certains développements en la matière, notamment les programmes de modernisation des armes nucléaires. À notre sens, cette préoccupation devrait être élargie pour couvrir également le développement quantitatif d'arsenaux nucléaires. En troisième lieu, nous saluons le fait que la conférence prenne note du travail effectué sur les conséquences humanitaires des armes nucléaires au cours des dernières années. Ce travail a été conséquent depuis l'adoption du document final de 2010 et, si nous sommes flexibles sur la formulation exacte, la conférence d'examen devra faire référence à cet important travail. Dans ce contexte, nous saluons et jugeons important que le rapport de cette commission réitère sa profonde inquiétude face aux conséquences catastrophiques de l'utilisation des armes nucléaires, que l'on trouve au paragraphe 27 du projet de rapport. Comme nous parlons ici d'une réitération, nous estimons nécessaire de reproduire le paragraphe correspondant du plan d'action de 2010. Ceci implique que nous devrions parler d'inquiétude quant aux conséquences catastrophiques de toute utilisation d'armes nucléaires. Surtout, nous devrions veiller à ne pas tronquer ce paragraphe et à rétablir le passage qui parle de la nécessité pour tous les États, en tout temps, de se conformer au droit international applicable, y compris le droit international humanitaire. Quatrième et dernier point, Nous saluons les paragraphes 14 et 15 sur la réduction des risques nucléaires. Ces paragraphes sont d'importance car ils constituent la base des paragraphes sur la réduction des risques dans le rapport prospectif de l'organe subsidiaire 1. Voilà, je m'arrêterai là, Monsieur le Président, en vous remerciant pour votre attention.
I thank the distinguished representative of Switzerland for his intervention. I now would like to give the floor to Sweden, to be followed by Spain. Sweden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. We thank you for your first draft of the report for this main committee and appreciate the effort made to reconcile the various positions expressed by state parties last week. My delegation believes that the draft report is a good basis for further deliberations, and we welcome that much of the language is also in line with the proposals of the two working papers presented by the Stockholm Initiative for Nuclear Disarmament. Let me highlight 6 points. First, the reaffirmation of past commitments in paragraph 5 is essential. My delegation is convinced that previously agreed measures and commitments, including the 2000 NPT Review Conference's 13 steps and the 2010 NPT Review Conference's 64-point action plan, remain valid and form the basis for making further progress in fully implementing the treaty and achieving a world free of nuclear weapons. 2. To achieve sustainable and effective solutions, it is essential that we integrate gender perspectives in all aspects of nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. We appreciate the proposals in paragraph 8 of the draft report, which clearly refers to this fact, and also acknowledged progress on gender-balanced delegations to this conference. At the same time, we believe that the language of paragraph 8 can be further strengthened, for example, by referring to leadership and decision-making processes, as well as asking state parties to report on progress. And we also take note of proposals by the Netherlands and also an SB1 by Canada to streamline language on gender in the different committees. And a third point, while the more substantial and forward-looking language on risk reduction is to be handled under the subsidiary body of this committee, we welcome the clarity on how to approach this topic in paragraph 16 of the draft report. In paragraph 15, we suggest also referring to the risk of nuclear weapons due to miscommunication or misperceptions, in addition to miscalculation or by accident. A fourth point that we wish to highlight regards paragraph 17, where we would like to see the language on reporting strengthened by asking nuclear weapon states to intensify efforts to agree on a standard reporting form and reporting intervals. We welcome the many good proposals from the NPDI on this issue. And 5, we welcome the language on the principle of no nuclear war and the importance of addressing nuclear threats in paragraph 20. However, we believe that the report must clearly highlight that words must be followed by deeds, and that any threat of use of nuclear weapons undermines the credibility of the nuclear weapon states leader's statement of January this year. And finally, 6, we appreciate that the contribution of nuclear disarmament verification activities is reflected in paragraph 46. However, we believe that we should welcome this work and encourage more state parties, in particular nuclear weapon states, to engage in this area. Similarly, we should acknowledge the importance and positive effects of nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states working together. Sweden will also submit these comments in writing. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Will be brought in to me. Hopefully. I want to start off with a note on, there it comes. Walk, don't run. Don't want to be liable for, oh, Jesus. All right, just want to start off with a note and a clarification on Ukraine. I think, as you may have seen in the past few days, there have been repeated comments by various Russian officials accusing the United Nations Secretariat of having either canceled or blocked a visit by the International Atomic Energy Agency to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. I want to clarify a few points. First, the IAEA is a specialized agency that acts in full independence in deciding how to implement its specific mandate. Second, the UN Secretariat has no authority to either block or cancel any IAEA activities. Third, in close contact with the IAEA, the UN Secretariat has assessed that it has, in Ukraine, the logistics and security capacity to be able to support any IAEA mission to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant from Kyiv, should, of course, the Ukrainian and Russian authorities agree. Yep. Okay. Also, senior personnel appointment to share with you, quite an important one. Today, the Secretary General is appointing Simon Stehl of Grenada as the Executive Secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, otherwise known as UNFCCC. The appointment has been made in consultations with the Conference of Parties through its bureau. Mr. Stehl, who will succeed Patricia Espinosa of Mexico, to whom the Secretary General is grateful for her commitment and dedicated service to the organization. The Secretary General also wishes to extend his appreciation to the Executive Secretary of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, Ibrahim Thiaw, who will continue to serve as acting Secretary of the UNFCCC until Mr. Stehl has assumed his position. Mr. Stehl brings to the position over 33 years of experience, about which you can read in the announcement that is being shared with you right now. Also, just want to read into the record an announcement we sent out on Friday afternoon. It's about the appointment of by the Secretary General Vermeer Mahmoud Abdullah of Sudan as the UN coordinator for the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Mr. Abdullah succeeds Fred Kenny, who you met via video conference, of the U.S., who was on loan from the International Maritime Organization as interim coordinator for the UN Joint Coordination Center. The Secretary General is very grateful for Mr. Kenny's dedication, his expertise, his commitment, and excellent leadership in implementing the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Mr. Abdullah, for his part, brings over 30 years of experience in the areas of humanitarian response and management with the World Food Program, as well as expertise in emergency operations, supply chain, and security. A lot more information is available online. Quick update from our colleagues in Mali. The work of the peacekeeping mission in Mali, MINUSMA, to support its work to support peace and security is also continuing. The special representative of the Secretary General and head of mission, El Ghassim Wane, was just completing a mission to Kidal, where he met with both the governor and the president of the interim authority of the region and other stakeholders. Discussions focused on means of improving cooperation, supporting the acceleration of the implementation of the peace agreement, and restoring state authority, as well as to improving basic social services. The special representative inaugurated 2 projects, one to assist communities through the installation of water boreholes at the College for Teachers in Kidal and Abuban village, and the other to provide medicines to Kidal Health Center. The new airstrip is also being constructed by the UN peacekeeping mission to open up the northern region to recovery and development opportunities, and additional projects are underway to help local communities generate income through access to water, farming, and craft production, and other activities. I try and test my ability to actually work live here. At some point, there will be an accident. Hans Grunberg, the Special Envoy for Yemen, briefed the Security Council by video conference today on the recent 2-month extension of the truce in that country. He said that along with the truce extension, the parties committed themselves to using the next 2 months to continue negotiations to reach an expanded truce agreement by October 2nd. Mr. Grunberg said that 4.5 months in the truce continues to broadly hold in military terms. He added that we continue to see significant decline in civilian casualties, with the first week of August seeing the lowest civilian casualty count since the start of the truce and since the beginning of the war. The Special Envoy said the road openings in Taiz and other governorates continue to be at the forefront of his efforts. He also discussed the opening of Sana'a International Airport to commercial flights, saying that so far 31 round-trip flights have operated to and from Sana'a, transporting more than 15,000 passengers. Just to let you know that on the Afghanistan issue, I think you had a pretty extensive briefing from Ramiz, but I would encourage you to look at a number of statements, notably from Sima Bahus, the head of UN Women, from Natalia Khanum, the head of the UN Population Fund, and from our friends across the street at UNICEF. Those statements focus very much on the issue of human rights for women and girls and the lack thereof in Afghanistan. There we go. Maybe I should start on time because, okay, there we go. All right, thank you. Yesterday, you will have seen that we issued a statement on Egypt in which the Secretary General expressed his sadness at the strategic fire that occurred at the Coptic Abu Sifin Church in Giza, in Egypt, near Cairo, killing and injuring dozens of worshippers, including many children. The Secretary General expressed his deepest condolences to the families of the victims of this horrific accident, as well as to the government of people of Egypt, and wished a swift recovery to those injured. And in Armenia, our team on the ground expressed their deepest condolences over the tragic explosion at a market today, an explosion that took place at a market in Yerevan. I think that explosion took place yesterday. Our thoughts are with those who lost loved ones, and we also wish a swift recovery to those who were injured. The UN team in Yerevan remains committed to supporting all people in the country during this difficult time. And I just want to close on unfortunately some sad news concerning one of your former colleagues. We heard over the weekend that Doğan Uluç passed away. He had been, as many of you know, since 1970 was Hurriyet's correspondent here at UN headquarters. I think he retired in the early 2000s, having served more than 30 years as the eyes and ears of very important Turkish media here at the United Nations. I think we all recall his extensive knowledge about the United Nations, his wry smile, his matter-of-fact attitude, and his tolerance towards young spokespeople who were just starting out. We send our condolences to his widow, who's a former colleague of ours, Carolyn Schuler Uluç, and to his whole family. Okay, Edie.
Thank you, Steph. 2 questions. First, does the Secretary General have any comment on the just announced result of the Kenya election, which has come in certain chaos with several members of the Electoral Commission saying they couldn't certify the results?
We've taken note of the results that were announced by the chairperson of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, and that the announcement was that William Ruto is the president-elect. We continue to encourage all candidates to abide by their commitment to recognize the outcome of the election and underscore the need to resort to legal channels to address any challenges that may arise. The respect for the rule of law is crucial for the peaceful completion of the electoral process.
And secondly, Alexander Navalny, the Russian opposition critic, said that he is being kept in solitary confinement. Does the Secretary General...
I hadn't seen that. Let me look on that and I'll give you some language. Yes, Murat.
Thank you, Stephen. Libyan ambassador just said that he objected to the latest SG selection for the UN envoy to Libya, and asking that these positions should be taken into consideration. So, are you gonna proceed on this?
Sorry, say again. That he was objecting to
the latest SG selection for the UN envoy to Libya. Mm-hmm. Are you gonna proceed?
I mean, we are proceeding as fast as the elements allow us to proceed. The procedure is the same as with any other head of mission that is mandated by the Security Council. As soon as we have someone to announce, and we want to do it as quickly as possible, we will do so.
But how can any new UN envoy can implement his mandate if there is main party objecting this?
Well, we haven't announced anyone yet, so I think there's a process. I mean, it's an open secret that it's been somewhat of a challenging search, not for lack of trying on our part, but the divisions that exist within and without this building are clear, and they make it more challenging for us. But the Secretary General is trying the best as he possibly can to get ahead of mission, and I know the Secretariat has been in close contact with the Libyan permanent representative on this issue.
Clarification: you are gonna proceed to in seeking to get approval from the Security Council, despite this objection.
Well, this is not a Libya-specific issue, right? There is a process through which people are appointed as head of peacekeeping mission or political missions that are mandated by the Security Council. And that involves an exchange of letters between the Secretary General and the President of the Security Council. The Security Council itself has its own procedures to clear the President for sending a letter back to the Secretary General saying they've taken note, which basically means they have no objection. So the process is the process, right? And I hope, and I think the Libyan people deserve that we find a candidate that is acceptable to all parties. But it has to go through the process that is singular to this wonderful organization. Benno.
Thank you. About your statement regarding the nuclear power plant expert mission, does your statement mean that you say the Russian statements are false and there's nothing to it? And secondly, everyone wants that mission, at least in saying. Russia said ideally in August. What stands in the way right now from your point of view, and do you think August would be a realistic timeline?
Obviously, I think from my understanding from the IAEA is that they would like to see this mission go as quickly as possible. It's their mandate. They're in the lead. We will support them in any way we can, and I think the statement is pretty clear that we have the security, the logistics capacity to help them get to Zaporizhzhia from Kyiv, right? But there needs to be an agreement with the two, with Russia and Ukraine for obvious reasons. That we know the power plant is currently in territory held by Russia. I think the impetus for me saying this comes from the fact that we have all seen statements coming out saying that the Secretary General, the Secretariat, is standing in the way or has blocked or has stopped the IAEA. And that's just not the case. Yes, sir.
Hi, Steph. I have a question on Syria. For the past month, Syrian government released several stories or news and accusations of the United States stealing crude oil from Al-Hasaka to Iraq. Does the Syrian mission here notify the UN about such a condition, and do you aware of this?
Listen, I've seen some press reports. There may have been letters from the Syrian government to the Secretariat. I don't see all of the. I haven't I don't go through all the letters. The principal position is that the natural resources of any country belong to that country. But I have no way to verify or confirm or deny the various accusations that are being bandied about. Okay, Pam, then I'll come back to the room.
Statement about the beginning today of the Ocean Conference.
I can't. Sorry, Pam. I cannot. If you want to disconnect and reconnect, I can't hear you. I'll come back to you. Iftikhar.
Thank you, Steph. I join you in condoling the death of Ulich, who was my roommate in room 265 for 20 years. But my question is about Dr. Hafiz Sadek. I'm hearing that she passed away. She was the head of the UNFPA and special advisor to the Secretary General on AIDS.
I will check, but I have not heard.
Okay.
Thank you, Oscar. No, sorry, I'll come back.
Yes, thank you, Stefan. Stefan, my question is regarding situation on Nicaragua, on peace and justice. The escalation is a tension between the Catholic Church and the government of Nicaragua. So the Catholic Church, the community is raising their voice, asking for intercession against the repression by Nicaragua's President Daniel Ortega, whose governance has been shut at 7 radio stations belonging to the Catholic Church, and with the action against Bishop Rolando Jose Alvarez, who has been placed under arrest, treated with prison for accusations of inciting violence actions to carry out of hate against the population. This is not the first time these kind of incidents are happening in Nicaragua. So what is the Secretary General reaction on these denouncements of persecution and harassment against the religion?
Oscar, thank you for the question. I have not seen that latest development, but I can tell you that whether it's the Secretary General or his High Commissioner for Human Rights, we've expressed repeatedly our concern at the overall human rights situation in Nicaragua, notably on the lack of space given to civil society, to put it subtly. Thank you.
And to follow up, Stephen, to follow up on these regards, those actions are considered as a crime against humanity for a government when it goes against the freedom of religion? And these actions regime or dictatorship?
I'm not in a position to designate what or does not constitute a crime against humanity. That's for legal experts. What I can tell you is that we have repeatedly expressed our concern, and also directly with the government through the Human Rights Office, at the general human rights situation in Nicaragua. Ms. Salome.
Thank
Thank you, Steph. I know we just had the briefing from the humanitarian coordinator from Afghanistan, but the Wall Street Journal is reporting that the United States has taken returning Afghan funds to the Taliban off the table, that those negotiations have stopped, and there's no intention of doing that. If that's, does the Secretary General have any knowledge of this? I know the UN is not directly involved in the talks. Do you have any reaction to what that would mean for the people of Afghanistan, and if that happens, or any concerns, or would there be a role for the UN to play if the Taliban can't handle that?
I mean, as you yourself said, we're not directly involved. I know there had been discussions and talks with the U.S. about the status of those funds, also in our humanitarian needs, but I'll try to get a bit more detail on that. Amélie, and then
Sorry if I misheard, but about the nomination of Simon Steele, when is he going to take over?
He will take, I mean, he has been, it's not a nomination, it's an announcement. He will take over, let me see if that's clear. I'm assuming fairly soon. It's a matter of I mean, he is officially being named. It's a matter of probably moving house and moving countries. But I'll try to get you an effective date of the start of service. Murad.
Thank you. Lebanese government announced that it will file a complaint to the UN regarding the Israelis' violations to its airspace. Have you received any letter, and what was the position also?
I mean, we routinely receive letters from either of the parties on violations. Those are then reported on publicly through the Secretary General and his reporting to the Security Council. Our overall message is, of course, for all the parties to respect the blue line and the engagements they've taken. Thank you. Pam Falk. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
A little better. Let's try.
Thank you. Oh, General, have a statement.
No.
Thank you.
Pam, sorry. I was trying to pick up one or two words that I could understand, but I cannot understand anything. So you feel free to email me the question, and I will answer it to the best of my ability if all the words are in there. Okay. Did you have a question? No. Yes. Okay, perfect.
I've been trying to get this question in for a while now.
Well, Benny, go ahead.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. What?
Go ahead. There's no but.
So, can you hear me?
Yes. Maybe you can ask Pam to come over so she can hear her. Sorry.
Can you hear me, Steph?
Yes, go ahead, Benny.
Can you? Okay, so the head of the OCHA office in Palestine was removed from her post, as far as I understand, Sarah Moskov, after she tweeted that about indiscriminate fire from the Islamic Jihad from Gaza in the latest skirmish. The tweet was removed, and then her account was deleted. Does the Secretary General support? First of all, does the Secretary General not acknowledge that there was indiscriminate fire from Gaza? Secondly, does he support the idea that people on the ground should be removed from their position because of tweet that they wrote?
Well, first of all, I would ask you to look back to the statement we issued last week, I believe, which specifically referred to the rockets being fired by Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So I think the Secretary General was very clear. My understanding is that the staff member concerned is being assigned to a new position.
But what about his whole saga of tweeting, removing the tweet,
I think that's
asking her to delete her account?
That I don't have those details. I would ask you to ask OCHA. But my understanding is that she was reassigned. She was reassigned. On the Secretary General's part, I think his statements have been very clear.
I did ask OCHA, and OCHA said that OCHA is doing a wonderful job in the Palestinian territories. That was their answer to that question that I just posed to you.
Well, that is their answer. Yeah, yes, please. Your microphone, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a follow-up question on Taliban. Talibans were banned and they were put under restrictions under UN Security Council resolutions. And now I think their assets are being held by the US. But being a guardian of the UN Security Councils, why the UN cannot interfere or play a third-party role in facilitating the dialogue between the U.S. and the Taliban?
Well, I mean, we're always willing and able to facilitate dialogue between two parties should we be asked. That's part of our general good offices. We've also, obviously, we had spoken to the U.S. side and others about frozen Taliban assets closer to a year ago now. And we obviously speak to the de facto authorities in order to ensure the effectiveness of the UN's humanitarian development matters.
So how about those UN resolutions, Security Council resolutions, which are yet to be implemented? They are not enforced. Does the UN stand as a guarantor of those resolutions?
Well, resolutions of the Security Council are meant to be implemented by its member states, and obviously when through resolutions we are instructed to act in a certain way, we do.
Thank you.
Benno.
A question about migrants. The governor of Texas is busing migrants through the country to Washington and New York something that people see as a political move. Does the Secretary General think that this is the appropriate way to treat migrants?
We will let the political discourse run its course here. But I will tell you that whether it's migrants or people applying for refugee status, it is primordial that they be treated in a way that respects their human dignity. Thank you all. Hasta mañana.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.